My name's Stephanie Allen. I'm from Bradford originally, and my grandparents came over from Ukraine after the Second World War. Both my grandma and my granddad told me stories of Ukraine before they came over here. My grandma came, I think she left Ukraine when she was 16. My granddad was 18, so they were very young when they left. So it was the very end of the Second World War when they left Ukraine. My grandma went to Germany and worked in a factory. Before that, I think she lived a very pastoral life. So countryside, sat looking after cows, didn't go to school that often, was always being told to leave the fields and go to school, and people turning up on her doorstep telling her that she should go. Granddad, on the other hand, was quite well educated, spoke 4 or 5 different languages. And he was taken into the army. So, but mainly their stories are about animals and farm life and the pets they had and those kind of stories of their mum. In Bradford, where I grew up, there's a huge Ukrainian community, and that's how we kept in touch with Ukrainian customs and traditions. So when I was young, I went to Ukrainian school every Saturday for 4 hours every Saturday, church on Sundays. There was also a Ukrainian youth group, or SUM, at the time. So I went to that Sunday afternoons, Ukrainian dancing once a week. So all of that I did till I was about 15, 16 years old. There's also a camp, summer camp, Tarasilka in Derby. So we went there once a year for 2-3 weeks. So it was a really huge cultural tradition in Bradford where the community kept going and talked to each other and kept these traditions and these customs and the language alive. It was trickier for me because my dad's English, so we didn't speak Ukrainian at home as much as my other friends did. So my Ukrainian isn't as good as a result as some of those other people because we didn't speak it all the time. But I do still speak Ukrainian with my grandma now. So I did feel different growing up knowing that I was Ukrainian, but it was particularly weird for me because my surname is English. So it wasn't immediately obvious to those people that I grew up with and my school colleagues that I was Ukrainian. I think it was more acute around Ukrainian Christmas at the time because sometimes you'd gone back to school by that point and you'd have a day off. And so people were always asking, why have you got a day off? Why aren't you coming into school? Because it was, and trying to explain why you weren't going in because it was Christmas Day was quite difficult. It was more difficult for my mum because she went to school not speaking any English. So when she started school, she only spoke Ukrainian. So she had a bit of a steep learning curve. But for me, at least, I spoke fluent English and sound English. So it didn't cause as much of a problem. And I didn't have as many questions because of my English surname. It did. There were negatives as well because it's sort of, I didn't do the things my friends did at weekends. So I think sometimes I was a bit bitter about that. You know, I couldn't go swimming on a Saturday morning. I couldn't learn an instrument or join the orchestra because I was at Ukrainian club, Ukrainian school, Ukrainian church, and doing all these things. But I think in retrospect, I'm glad that I had that different upbringing. But it did make you feel not entirely like your friends, a little bit separate. I did have 2 separate groups of friends. So I had English friends who I hung around with quite a lot and a group of Ukrainian friends. Luckily, a girl 3 doors down from me was one of my good friends who was Ukrainian. So we used to use it as a great opportunity to talk about people on the bus in another language or, you know, have conversations that we knew no one could understand. So it came in really useful and still now, with my mum and my baba, we will talk in Ukrainian. And then my mum has to occasionally remind my baba now there are a lot more Ukrainians in the country and maybe that you can't get away with talking in Ukrainian and no one will understand you anymore. But she's 89, so she doesn't care. Oh, I'm sorry, 98, so she doesn't care what people think anymore. There are several traditions that I think we've kept going. I think Christmas is an interesting one because Rіздво was always the 6th of January, 7th of January, and we've done that for so many years. It's been really difficult to adapt when that changed a couple of years ago. Because my dad's English, we had this full traditional English Christmas that we also had. And so I think the whole community in Bradford has had lots of conversations about, should we change? Should we not change? We know we should change. We know that that's what everyone's wanting. But at the same time, we've built our lives around this sort of 2 weeks difference and being able to separate them out and fully enjoy the traditions of cooking the food, going to church, being with friends and family. We had, when I was young, quite an extended family because obviously my grandparents came over here with no family, so they created their own. So we had a lot, and like our Christmases when I was young was like 20, 15, 20 people around the table, all drinking whiskey and, enjoying political conversation and heated debate around whatever was happening at the time. Whereas now it's only my grandma, me, my sister, my mum and my dad. So it's much smaller. But you still have that memory of the traditions of sitting around that table and the carol singers coming round. And they always used to come to our house last because it was the most fun. And so we used to have these memories of lots of people coming round and this time of visiting houses and exchange and life. And to move that to Christmas Eve, English Christmas Eve, it's really hard to make that translation across. So we've decided this year we were celebrating Yurdan instead. So we'll just move the same. So we keep the same foods. Mama makes it from scratch every year. So my mum and my sister were there making vareniki all day on Christmas Eve. So some, and passing down Borscht recipes and all of those things that have been handed down from my baba to my mum and from my mum to us still exist. How much me and my sister will carry that on, I don't know. Food is hugely important in connecting you to your tradition and your family and the memories that you've got. I think it brings out memories, and you've got that real visceral connection to a certain moment in time or a certain thing. It's like I keep harking back to having kapustar and boiled sausage because that was something we had on Christmas Day. I would never make that myself, but the smell of it, if you can smell it somewhere, or you walk to I think now the markets, like the food markets, sometimes you'll come across that particular smell and it'll take you right back to a moment in time. Also the smell of Polish shops and the dill and herbs and various. So if you walk into those Eastern European shops, that smell is really reminiscent of my childhood and connects you back down, a different line of your history and your memory that your friends and the people around you don't really have. So I think food really plays a strong part in that. I think one of my favorite recipes is probably borscht, but only because I can do it. So I've been brought up very much, my Ukrainian is of the 1940s, 1950s. That's stuck because that's the Ukrainian we started to use, whereas those words now mean something different to Ukrainians coming over nowadays. I think I've learned a lot of how to keep traditions alive from my upbringing. I would say, though, that a lot of our community was based around church and religion, and I think the younger generations haven't got that as much in their lives. So keeping the other things alive are really, really important. I think holding on to the language. But for me, in Bradford, I think it was also having space. So having the Ukrainian club, having a place they could gather, having somewhere where you could meet others that weren't in your immediate circle, that you could exchange ideas, that you could talk, that you could share news, share family stories. And music, I think, has really helped as well. So singing and dancing, but mainly singing and music really was passed down. But I think the Ukrainian club became the heart of that. And I think without that space, it's very hard for them to all find each other. One thing I think is really important, and what I've seen happen quite a lot, is the younger generations and people coming over informing the Ukrainian traditions we have developed, and my understanding of what it is to be Ukrainian has really shifted over the past 2-3 years, because you're meeting this huge influx of people who are like you, who have the same background as you, and are coming from a country that I have a fixed idea of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, or whenever my grandparents came over. So that mingling of new and old and that learning from each other has been really, really lovely experience of kind of updating my knowledge of what being Ukrainian is.